You think fear will keep you quiet forever? Deacon's voice was low, too calm. This is Chicago. No one's coming to save you. That was the moment Ellie realized silence wasn't safety. It was a trap. One mistake, one warning note under a stake, and suddenly she was caught between rotten meat-forged invoices and a billion-dollar cover-up. But the truth, it never stays buried for long. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The light above the locker room crackled like a trapped insect flickering every other second. Ellie sat hunched on a low bench, sandwich in hand, not even bothering to warm it. Turkey, probably. The bread was stiff at the edges, dried from a night in the fridge. But she chewed anyway, letting it fill the silence. The air carried the sting of mop water mixed with fryer grease. Her apron still bore the pale yellow smear of this morning's hollandaise disaster, dried egg yolk stiff against the linen. She pulled out her phone, the corner of its screen spidered with cracks, and tapped it awake. One message. Reminder, prescription renewal due. Total 287 13s. Insurance limit reached. No buffer left. No clever extensions. Not this time. She let out a slow breath through her nose and leaned against the metal lockers, their chill seeping through her uniform. Her feet ached inside the black non-slip soles worn nearly flat. With a weary sigh, she bent forward and slipped off her right shoe. Fresh blood marked her sock, a thin split at the heel, seeping red into the fabric. She pulled a napkin from her lunch bag and pressed it gently, dabbing more than drying the pressure, drawing a wince. Behind her, the back door clattered open. "You're still here, Alva." The dishwasher, short, sharp tongue somewhere in her 50s, stood with arms dusted in flour and soap suds like she'd fought two battles at once. 15 minutes, Ellie answered without looking up. Alva chuckled, slinging her bag over one shoulder. "You work like you're trying to vanish into the floor. They won't pay extra for being invisible." Ellie gave the faintest smile. "Maybe I like being overlooked." "Honey," Alva muttered, "that's how they forget you're bleeding." The door banged again. A man passed down the narrow hall, tall shoulders hunched in a corduroy jacket. He didn't glance around, just moved through, but Ellie caught the scuffed boots, the unshaven jaw. Not a regular. His presence rippled the air. Ellie rose, slid her shoe back on, ignoring the sting. The locker clicked shut behind her as she tightened her apron. She had almost reached the exit when she froze. A scent. Faint metallic. Not bleach. Not grease. Meat. Off somehow. Slightly sour. Not strong enough to alarm, but enough to still her hand on the knob. She narrowed her eyes toward the kitchen's swinging doors, fingers tapping a nervous rhythm against her thigh. Cold air rolled from the walk-in freezer, spilling across the tile like low fog. Ellie stepped carefully past the prep sink, gaze trained on the stainless steel table, where the butcher unloaded a fresh shipment of beef. Each plastic-wrapped cut landed with a dull, wet slap. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, stuttering every few seconds. She lingered near the edge of the station, close enough to see without drawing notice. Something was wrong with the meat. It wasn't glaring, not enough to cost anyone their job. But to someone who noticed the details, and Ellie always did, the flaws were clear. A slick film clung too thickly to the surface. The fat, instead of creamy white, showed a greenish tinge near the edges. And the smell, subtle coppery, like pennies forgotten in a damp drawer. Not nauseating, but wrong. Ronnie the butcher, broad-shouldered and heavy-set, peeled another slab from its wrap and slapped it onto the board. Ellie cleared her throat. "Hey, does that batch smell a little off to you?" He didn't glance up. "What the ribeyes? They look different today." This time he turned knife-in-hand, eyes narrowing beneath the sweat-stained cap. "You working for the USDA now?" Ellie straightened. "No, I just thought—" "Then stop thinking. Do your tables." She stepped back, catching herself before apologizing. Ronnie had already resumed slicing, humming off key through his nose. Behind her came a sound, a measured footfall. Not someone arriving, but someone who had lingered long enough to make it unsettling. Deacon Mallory. His presence shifted the air, heavy as a storm front. Cold, quiet, static humming beneath the skin. He stood only a few feet away, arms folded, the faintest smile playing at his lips, as if already bored. "You planning to join the kitchen staff, Miss Grafton?" His tone was mild. Ellie shook her head. "No, sir." He moved closer. Then let's not blur the roles. If you want to keep yours, don't let anyone see you smell the meat. Her gaze held his longer than it should have. Then she murmured, "Yes, sir," and walked away. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. The line had already been drawn. At the server station, Ellie wiped her palms on a towel, fingers twitching with nerves. The ticket printer whirred and spat out a slip. Table 32. She frowned. That spot was rarely used, tucked beside the kitchen doors, half hidden by a column and a fake ficus. Usually for latecomers or walk-ins, management preferred to keep out of sight. Ellie grabbed a menu and stepped into the dining room. The man was already waiting. Corduroy jacket, olive brown and worn soft. Smudged, thick-rimmed glasses. Hair combed back neatly, though, without much care. He didn't look broke. He looked, unconcerned. The sort who'd owned quality things long enough to forget their worth. She offered the usual greeting. He didn't look up. "I'll have the monarch's rib," he said, "medium rare." Ellie hesitated. The monarch's rib was the centerpiece, dry-aged hand-cut, finished with truffle demi-glace. A plate reserved for men in tailored suits and gold watches, not frayed jackets. "Are you sure?" she asked. For a moment he lifted his eyes. "Just a beat." "I'm sure." A chill threaded the base of her neck. That meat. She stepped into the break room with a tight chest. Empty. No cameras. From a drawer beside the microwave, she pulled a napkin and a battered ballpoint pen. Her hand hovered. Writing the words would make them true. "Meat's not right. Don't eat." She folded the napkin twice, fingers trembling as she slid it behind her order pad. By the time she returned, the steak was plated, gleaming on porcelain like a trophy. She steadied her breath, lifted it, and carried it out. At the table, she set the dish down gently, then leaned just far enough to slip the folded napkin beneath the charger's edge. Barely visible. The man didn't move, but through the thick lenses his eyes caught hers. No nod, no smirk, only the weight of recognition. Ellie turned away, hands shaking. Her throat felt tight, as if something unfinished lodged there. At the server station, she reached for a glass and poured water. The ice struck against crystal, loud in the hush. Table 32 sat just outside the chandelier's warm circle of light. Amber pooled across the floor, leaving that corner dim, as though the restaurant itself couldn't decide whether to spotlight it or ignore it altogether. Ellie approached with a steady hand, placing the wine list gently beside the man's water glass. Her voice stayed, even though her stomach had begun a slow, anxious twist. "Would you like to see the wine selections for your entree?" The man didn't reply at once. His gaze drifted lazily across the dining room, past couples laughing too loudly, past suits, swirling Pinot, as though they knew what it meant. He wasn't admiring. He was studying, storing details. At last he nodded. Something red. A bold one. "Surprise me." Ellie blinked. He hadn't glanced at prices, hadn't asked for suggestions. It was the sort of answer given by someone for whom money meant nothing. She gave a small nod and headed for the wine station. Behind her, whispers rose. "Guy like that ordering the monarch's rib, come on. He's probably gonna walk. Hope Ellie's got $200 handy. She'll be covering that check if he bails." She tuned them out. The cork gave a soft pop as she opened a mid-shelf Cabernet, full-bodied, the kind that lingered on the breath. Her hands were steady now. She poured with care, wiped the lip of the bottle, and carried the glass back with the practiced grace of someone who knew one mistake could cost more than tips. The man lifted his eyes as she set it down. "Thank you," he said. Ellie inclined her head, retreating to the server's nook, where the faux ivy gave her a sliver of view. Her fingers toyed with the apron hem. If he skipped the bill, Deacon wouldn't just dock her wages, he'd tarnish her reputation too. She wasn't sure which weighed heavier, the risk of losing her job or the sting of humiliation. The food remained untouched. He raised the wine instead, sipping slowly, setting the glass down with the care of handling crystal. His gaze swept the room again, this time settling on Ellie's reflection in the window behind her. For a long moment he simply watched. Silas Merrick wasn't here for flavor. He was testing for honesty. This wasn't his first time sitting in a restaurant he technically owned, dressed like a man no server would fuss over twice. Habit, perhaps. Sometimes curiosity, sometimes suspicion, sometimes regret. But this girl, Ellie, stood apart. She hadn't fawned, hadn't frozen, hadn't tried to sell him anything. From the moment she approached, her face had stayed the same, neutral, without being cold, worn down, yet not bitter. And the napkin. He'd read it before even lifting a knife. 3 short lines carved in shaky ink by someone who feared the act of writing it might cost her job. Since then, he hadn't touched the steak. Instead, it sat cooling on porcelain while he studied the stage around him, servers with forced smiles, managers quick to vanish tension, humming beneath the polish. Ellie returned 20 minutes later, not with the check, not yet, just to clear. She faltered at the sight of the plate, nearly full utensils neatly resting. Her eyes flicked to the edge of the napkin, still peeking from under the charger. She began, but he lifted a hand. I trust you. The words were quiet, but they struck deep. Ellie froze. Her thoughts scrambled for meaning. Defense escape. Was it mockery, a warning, a test? The room blurred behind her, voices muffled as though underwater. He offered no explanation, only looked at her with steady calm as though nothing more was needed. Her grip tightened on the plate's rim. Heat still rose from the steak, carrying that faint sourness beneath the seasoning. The office door clicked shut behind her, too soft for the weight it carried. The room was barely larger than a storage closet, one metal desk, a locked cabinet, a fluorescent bulb buzzing like it longed to confess. No windows. The air tasted of stale coffee and lemon disinfectant. Deacon Mallory didn't glance up immediately. He sat behind the desk, sleeves rolled to the elbow, thick forearms resting motionless. A single sheet of paper lay in front of him, spotless except for a dark smudge in the corner. Ellie remained standing. He tapped his pen once, then again, before lifting his eyes. You think I don't know the game you played last night? Her mouth opened, then closed. Asking what he meant would only admit she had something to hide. Deacon smiled without warmth. Relax, Grafton. No one's found your little napkin yet. But I have a sense for insubordination. He slid the paper across the desk. Speaking of responsibility, she glanced down. A delivery invoice, frozen beef dated 4 weeks earlier. At the bottom, her name in block letters, followed by a scrawled signature. Her signature. Except it wasn't. The curves were wrong, the pressure uneven. Whoever forged it hadn't known how she crossed her T or left the loop of her E just shy of closing. Cold crept into her stomach. That delivery ran nearly 3,000 over, Deacon said evenly. 2,143.72 to be exact. Inventory shrinkage. Bad math or something more creative. Ellie lifted her eyes. I didn't sign that. You sure? He leaned forward on his elbows. Because your name's right here, and I don't let theft go undocumented. I never touched that invoice. His head tilted. You calling me a liar? No, she said quickly. But that's not my handwriting. Deacon leaned back, opened a drawer, and pulled out a bound ledger. Want to play forensic expert? Be my guest. But the audit's already at corporate, and I have to give them a name. You're already on thin ice. Blood roared in her ears. So what happens now? You've got 2 choices, he said, slow and measured. Option 1, I fire you. Fraud, tampering, lying to management. That record follows you. Good luck finding work. Her fists curled tight at her sides. Option 2, he continued, you stay, you work. We dock $50 a week until the loss is covered. You keep your job, your benefits, and you stop poking your nose where it doesn't belong. Ellie's breath hitched. $50 a week was nearly a third of her groceries. Miles's medication didn't wait for paychecks. I didn't do this, she said again, voice low. It isn't my signature. You really want to die on this hill? He asked, rising now, tugging his cuff straight. Because I promise Grafton the fall won't be worth it. His shadow stretched long across the desk. She stared at the page. Her name lay there like a snare, neat final damning. There was no proof to clear her, no cameras, no witnesses. Only her word, and here her word carried no weight. Her throat constricted. She gave a small nod. Okay. Deacon's smile softened, almost kind. Smart girl. He moved past her toward the door, opened it, then paused before she could leave. You know, he said conversationally, people like you girls from nowhere, with bills and bad luck, they survive best when they remember their place. Then he walked away. She stayed in the room a moment longer. The fluorescent buzz grew louder, rising into something that sounded almost like laughter. Out in the hall, the shift had already turned. Dinner rush was building. She hurried to the restroom, locked the door, and bent double as pain twisted through her gut. The nausea burned low deeper than stress, an ache she hadn't felt in weeks. When she finally stepped out, her face was pale, lips pressed thin. She didn't go back to the floor right away, only leaned against the cold wall near the exit, one hand braced against her stomach. It crossed the dining room unseen by most. Silas Merrick watched from his corner table. He hadn't heard the exchange, but he saw her expression, and that was enough. The hallway stank faintly of fried onions and old bleach. Ellie jiggled the stubborn key in the lock, muttering as the buzzer blared once behind her. Third time that week, the entry system had failed. In this building, nothing got fixed unless it leaked into someone else's apartment. Her fingers throbbed from clutching the grocery bags too tightly, shoulders burning beneath the weight of the day. One plastic handle snapped as she shoved the door open with her hip, a bruised apple rolling across the scuffed linoleum. She let it go. The bulb above the stove glowed a dim amber, throwing shadows along faded wallpaper. Home such as it was. The heat hadn't come on yet. She lowered the bags carefully and listened. A cough. Rough. Too measured. Like someone trying to hide the sound of drowning lungs. Miles, she called, already hurrying toward the bedroom. He crouched beside the oxygen tank, one hand on the wall, the other fumbling with the regulator. The tubing dangled loose, mask abandoned by his knee. "I had it," he rasped before she could speak. "You didn't," she murmured, kneeling. She twisted the knob until the valve clicked, hiss of oxygen rushing back. His shoulders eased, jaw loosening. Still, his eyes avoided hers. Pride came cheap but clung like tar. She steadied him upright and guided him to the couch with its patched armrest. His frame was so light now it frightened her. There had been a time she couldn't lift his backpack without groaning. That felt like another lifetime. "Dinner," she asked softly. "If it's not soup, I'm filing a complaint." She cracked a smile and stepped into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed like it was trying to console her. Its shelves offered little: a bag of frozen peas, the remains of a rotisserie chicken, a container of broth. Enough to cobble into something warm. She stirred the pot with slow, deliberate motions, watching the steam curl upward. Her back throbbed. Her wrists still tingled from the tray she nearly dropped when the manager barked her name mid-shift. But none of that compared to the knot twisting in her stomach, the kind born of more than spoiled food or skipped meals. "Long day," Miles called from the couch. She didn't look over. "Not really. You always stir soup like it offended you. It's just soup." He coughed, then gave a short laugh. "Okay." When she handed him a mug, his fingers wrapped around it eagerly. He blew on the surface as though it were ritual. She sat across from him on the floor, legs folded beneath her. "You want to talk about it?" "Nope." He sipped. "Liar." Her smile never touched her eyes. She rose, drifted to the junk drawer, and pulled out an old accounting notebook from a heap of coupons and takeout menus. Spiral spine, bent pages, stained corners curled. She opened to a blank sheet. Ink scratched unevenly. Her notes from the past 2 weeks formed a jagged trail: delivery weights that didn't match inflated invoices, vendor names she'd never seen, and now a forged signature. It was looking less like sloppiness, more like design. She tapped the pen against her lips, hearing again Deacon's calm voice. "Girls like you should know their place, and too polished, too practiced." He'd said it before. Across the room, Miles had drifted to sleep, mug balanced against his chest, rising and falling with each shallow breath. She tugged the blanket up to his shoulders and brushed a curl from his forehead. Far from them, in a modest hotel wedged between a laundromat and a used bookstore in Lincoln Square. Silas Merrick hung his jacket on the door. The collar was frayed, sleeves thinning at the seams. He placed his glasses beside a glass of water on the nightstand, then unlocked his phone. He typed with careful pauses. Suspected theft at the Gilded Graft. Pattern and vendor fraud. Audit needed. Quietly, sent. He exhaled and stepped to the window. The view was nothing, just rooftops, a sputtering street lamp, a plastic bag snagged on a fire escape twitching in the wind. The city looked tired. He stood motionless for a long time. Back at the apartment, Ellie closed her notebook and slid it beneath the mattress, not out of fear someone might steal it, but because that's where she hid what mattered most. She shut off the lamp, letting the room sink into soft blue shadow. From the couch came a quiet voice. "If someone offered to help you, would you let them?" She didn't answer. The ceiling stayed silent. The building held its breath, and so did she. The dining room flickered under candlelight soft gold and shadows, yet the air buzzed like a hornet's nest. Laughter broke in sharp bursts, silverware clinked through layered conversations, and somewhere beneath it all, a string quartet strained to make Billie Eilish sound elegant. Ellie steadied the tray against her palm, balancing 3 champagne flutes as she wove between guests draped in jewelry that likely carried insurance tags. A 50th birthday, ego-sized. The cake alone had swallowed an hour of 2 pastry chefs' labor, 4 tiers, sugared roses, flecks of edible gold. She hadn't cleared the head table before Deacon slid to her elbow. He said nothing, only fixed her with that look, mouth pinched, head tilted, just so the silent reminder, slow down, smile, don't screw this up. Her nod was barely a twitch before she moved on. By the 3rd refill, her knuckles ached and her lower back burned. Sweat prickled under her collar, yet she kept moving. Each pass, Deacon's stare followed measuring posture, pace tray, balance. He was savoring it. Mid-shift, a prep cook touched her arm. "Hey, can you grab the inventory log from the office, the old one? Blue binder." Ellie flicked a glance toward Deacon, then nodded. "Be right back." The office sat empty when she slipped in, door clicking shut behind her. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. She spotted the binder beneath a pile of vendor catalogs, but as she reached for it, something stilled her. Deacon's laptop. Open, unlocked. Her hand hovered. 2 seconds of hesitation. Then she stepped behind the desk. The screen showed a file browser, a folder titled Internal Freight highlighted. She clicked. Nested within Alt Prime Cuts, Route B Reclass Kitchen, a vendor merge, Midwest 22. All recent, all euphemistic. Her pulse raced. She pulled out her phone, snapping photos, quickly adjusting for glare. Her fingers trembled enough to blur the last one. She tried again, steadier. Then closed the folder, dimmed the screen, and lifted the binder. Back in the dining room, the night had reached crescendo. The guest of honor stood on a chair, toasting himself, waving a flute like a saber. Ellie arrived in time to catch the end. "And here's to never working a day in your life when you marry well," laughter exploded. She replaced a fallen napkin, eyes sweeping the tables, and froze. Silas Merrick sat near the edge of the private party. No corduroy jacket tonight, he wore a tailored charcoal suit collar, open no disguise. Someone leaned close to greet him. She missed the name, but their handshake spoke of familiarity, not service. Silas raised a finger. The man nodded and stepped back. Cold realization struck. This wasn't a mystery diner. This was the owner. He surveyed the room like a landlord watching strangers trash his house. Then his gaze caught hers. The tray nearly slipped. Her feet moved before thought carrying her behind the bar. Her heart pounded so hard the quartet dissolved into silence. He hadn't spoken, hadn't smiled, hadn't frowned, but his look held no surprise. It held recognition. After the cake was cut, after the guests spilled into waiting black cars, Ellie lingered at the espresso machine polishing counters already clean. Her hands refused to steady. He appeared soundlessly, stopped beside her close but not crowding. His voice came low, meant for her alone. "You left me a note." She didn't answer, only gave the smallest nod. Her fingers clenched around the dish towel, knuckles pale. Silas studied her a moment. Then gently he placed a folded business card by the register. Not pushed toward her, not offered into her hand. "Use it," he said, and walked away. She didn't touch it, not yet. The benches were damp from afternoon drizzle, and the October wind carried teeth. Ellie tugged her coat tight, her hands buried deep in pockets, fingers curling around lint, and a forgotten pen cap. Across the path beneath the halo of a flickering street lamp, Silas sat with one leg crossed over the other elbow resting on the curved armrest of the bench. He didn't wave, just stared out across the dim park, with the stillness of someone who'd long stopped expecting company. Ellie crossed the gravel slowly, boots crunching against scattered leaves, and lowered herself onto the far end of the bench without a word. A full minute passed before she spoke. "I'm not good at this," she admitted, "sharing secrets with men in suits." Silas kept his eyes on the dark trees. "Good. I'm not good at pretending I don't listen." That almost coaxed a smile from her. Almost. He let the pause stretch the quiet hanging between them, like a cautious animal neither dared startle. The city hummed faintly in the distance, but here only the wind moved, stirring the brittle leaves overhead, drawing a groan from the old swing set in the dark. Ellie slipped a folded page from her coat pocket, smoothing the creases against her thigh with deliberate care. I wrote everything I could recall: shipment dates, vendors that shifted without notice, prices that spiked then dipped when no one checked. Silas accepted the page carefully, fingertips pinching the edges as though the ink might smear. He read in silence, then gave a small nod. "There's more," she said. "Screenshots, files. I backed them up. Somewhere safe." A beat of hesitation. "Yes." He folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. "Anyone else see this?" "No. Just me. Anyone suspect you're watching?" Her mind flicked to Deacon's office, the smug tilt of his chin, the way he'd said, "Girls like you," as if it were an equation with only one outcome. "I think someone's looking for a scapegoat," she murmured. "Not sure if they've decided it's me yet." Silas tapped his knee rhythm steady. "Ever done something like this before? What slipping secrets to billionaires in the park? That or standing between someone and a lie they wanted to protect?" Ellie glanced sideways, her eyes worn, but sharp. "I've stood between my brother and people who thought he didn't deserve care. Does that count?" He considered, then said quietly, "Yes." For the first time, his gaze turned fully toward her. "Tell me about him." "Miles. He's 23. Thinks I don't know he sneaks cigarettes when I'm out. Loves terrible TV. Sleeps like stone but pretends he's fragile." She rubbed the back of her neck. "Lung condition since he was a kid. Progressive. Some days he's fine. On the bad ones he wheezes so hard I don't know how he still manages to joke." Silas produced a small tin of mints, offering one. She shook her head. He slid one past his teeth and turned back to the empty lot. "I used to design buildings," he said. 2 years after college. Got tired of watching people cut corners that could kill. You quit, walked out of a site meeting and never returned, and decided restaurants would be cleaner. His exhale carried weight. "I thought feeding people would be less political than housing them." "I was wrong." Ellie tilted her head. "So you knew about Deacon? The invoices. All of it, I suspected. Just didn't think it was this deep, or this brazen." The night pressed close around them. "I'm still trying to work out," he admitted, "how to dismantle something I built without crushing the ones trapped beneath it." A moth circled the lamp above its wings, whispering against the glass. Ellie rose slowly, brushing crumbs from her coat. From her pocket, she drew the USB, small, scratched, barely held together. She stepped close enough that he could hear the rustle of fabric. No speech, no preamble. She extended her hand, the drive pinched between two fingers steady. He didn't snatch it, only lifted his palm, and she let it fall into his hand. Her eyes stayed fixed on his. That simple motion spoke louder than any vow. The window in Silas's office stretched from floor to ceiling, yet the expanse of glass only made him feel caged. The skyline blinked with scattered lights, each rectangle a life he couldn't name. Below, traffic murmured like a restless tide, the occasional horn spiking the rhythm. He turned away. On the wall hung an unfinished blueprint, a bridge his last design before walking away from that world. The pencil strokes had faded, but the geometry remained etched in his memory. One side braced with heavy beams rooted deep. The other barely suggested a phantom sketch. Like him. Like the company. He lowered himself into the old chair, its frame groaning in protest. The laptop glowed on the desk, open to the folder Ellie had named Alt Prime Cuts. Evidence. Spreadsheets, invoices, photos of receipts marked in red, even a blurred image of Deacon's desktop mid-draft. He scrolled one file at a time, jaw tightening with each reveal. Orders for meat that never shipped. Vendors that hadn't existed half a year earlier. Costs swollen without reason. This wasn't negligence, it was engineered. Concealed like rot beneath paint. His fingers hovered, then dragged again. Dates repeating. Invoices stamped twice. Others marked, corrected with numbers subtly changed. A lattice of deceit. He lifted his phone thumb, pressing the top contact. "Harlan." After several rings, "Silas, I need a sweep of what gilded graft. Start with logistics, vendor accounts. Keep it quiet. Not legal yet." The pause carried weight. This about the girl. Silas's gaze flicked to the USB in his port. "It's about something I should have seen long before she did." Another silence. If this leaks, I know. Merrick Group won't walk away intact. We'd lose a quarter of the board. 2 investors minimum, and we'd earn every loss. Harlan exhaled hard. Fine. Internal only. But if legal hears, they won't. Not yet. The call ended. Silas leaned back the chair's frame, shrieking in complaint, like it disapproved. On screen, the cursor blinked with indifferent rhythm. He had weathered lawsuits, exposés, mobs with placards. Fallout never frightened him. But this was structural, not scandal, but collapse. He had trusted Deacon. That cut deeper than the forged numbers. He'd promoted him, granted latitude without oversight. Once a strength, the trust had calcified into fracture. Ellie's face intruded on the thought. Not pleading, not furious, just stretched thin like a rope close to breaking. Her words calm, her hands betraying the strain. His phone pulsed again. A message. Deacon started calling vendors today. Saw him shredding papers. Changed his computer password. Thought you should know. He read it once, then slower. No demands, no flourish, just facts. A signal laid brick by brick. He moved to the blueprint. Under the lamp, the unfinished bridge gaped at him, one half empty, the other suspended. On the shelf sat a carpenter's pencil, short, one edge flattened to keep it still. He picked it up, pressed its graphite to the yellowed paper. He didn't draft beams or sketch cables. He made a single stroke, straight, unbroken, from bank to bank. Behind him, the laptop dimmed, washing the office in a colder glow. A car alarm chirped outside, then cut short. The room fell into its own rhythm, the radiators ticked, the hush of air through a tired vent. Silas lingered on the single line he'd drawn across the blueprint, then turned back to the desk. A blank email blinked open. He began to type. The hallway behind the kitchen pressed narrow at night. Yellow bulbs flickered overhead like tired lighters, throwing dull halos onto damp stone. The smell of grilled meat clung stubbornly to the walls, threaded with bleach and ammonia, an aftertaste that refused to fade. Ellie skirted a mop bucket, shoes squeaking against tile. At the staff locker room, her hand hovered on the handle. Something was wrong. The door, usually ajar from careless hands, was sealed flush, too deliberate. She eased it open. The vending machine's hum filled the hush, broken only by a drip from a pipe above. She turned to her locker and froze. Her phone wasn't where she'd hidden it. The gray hoodie still sagged on its hook. The aspirin bottle, nearly empty, still balanced beside her brother's folded pharmacy slip tucked in a shoe. But the phone, once wedged beneath a rolled apron, sat bare on the shelf. Screen up. Waiting. She snatched it, thumb pressed hard. Nothing. Second try, lock screen. But her passcode failed. First, second, even the backup. By the fourth attempt, the device buzzed, locked out 5 minutes. She sank onto the bench, breath caught sharp in her throat, sweat gathering along her spine. Footsteps shuffled at the doorway. Danny, the youngest line cook, lingered there, apron still tied, eyes darting toward the hall like he didn't belong. He stepped in, a voice low. "Hey," he said. "You didn't hear this from me." Ellie clutched the phone tighter as if it might bite. "I think Deacon's watching people," Danny whispered. Saw him messing with something in the corner. His chin tipped toward a vent above the lockers. Little black box. Looked like a camera. Her gaze followed. That shadowed spot right above where she always changed her shoes. "I'm not part of this," Danny rushed. But I didn't like the way he looked at me last week. Like he knew I'd noticed. He slipped a folded paper from his pocket edges, damp with sweat. "Found this by the prep table. Not mine." Before she could speak, he was gone, apron swinging behind him. Ellie unfolded the sheet with trembling hands. A printed invoice. Alt prime cuts. Quantity column, blacked out prices, bloated past reason. At the bottom, a signature looped, bold, unfamiliar. Logan Voss. Her pulse hitched. Not Deacon. Not a manager here. But Voss, that name she knew. Silas had mentioned a Harlan Voss COO. Logan had to be kin. The locker shut with a metallic groan, the sound sharp, private, wrong. She moved quickly down the hall, past the deserted dessert counter, through the dish station, still slick with suds. The dining floor gleamed, reset for tomorrow with surgical order. Yet the prickling at her neck said eyes still tracked her. She pulled her coat tight and pushed through the delivery exit. Trash bins lined the alley like sleeping beasts. Cold air stung her face. A sour chemical note drifted from the vent's gasoline. Ellie didn't head home. 6 blocks later, she ducked into an all-night cafe, the kind where Wi-Fi came free and the barista asked no questions. She ordered tea she wouldn't drink just for a seat. The phone remained locked, scrubbed clean. Everything, photos, notes, receipts gone, except the invoice in her pocket. She laid it flat on the table, snapped a picture with her backup phone, then tapped out a brief message to Silas. Subject: not just Deacon, attached invoice scan. No words, no sign-off. Miles away, parked at a shuttered gallery, Silas checked his inbox. He opened the attachment. The signature glared up at him. Logan Voss. His breath escaped hollow like air from a slashed tire. This wasn't one man skimming profit. It was the system feeding itself. The filing room, buried 3 levels under Merrick's West Loop office, hadn't been touched in years. Most of the newer staff didn't know it existed. Even the fluorescents buzzed with neglect, dust curling in their glow above endless beige cabinets. Silas nudged the filing room door shut with his elbow arms weighed down by half-labeled boxes. The air carried the musk of aging paper sharpened by the metallic heat of a printer still cooling behind him. He scanned the wall of codes until spotting the section Supplier Vetting 2016-2023. His fingers brushed along the rows, labels scribbled in uneven hands, vendors' approval chains audits. None of it digitized, never migrated. Alt Prime cuts sat wedged in A27, A39. He pulled the folder free, its tab darkened from years of handling. At the steel table, he unclipped the latch and spread the thin stack across the surface. Invoices, certifications, inspection notes, clean organized. At first glance, the company sparkled, but near the back, a chain of ownership diagram waited. Alt Prime Cuts rolled up into Mercantile 42 LLC, which belonged to Griffin Holdings, which funneled through Kovark Nutritionals, a name Silas hadn't seen since his early years. His eyes fixed on the Griffin Holdings logo. He remembered the Indiana plant shuttered in 2015 after listeria spread through its lines. Customers sick, 2 dead, settled quietly, buried deep. He flipped forward until a faded photocopy stopped him cold. 1 page. Approval document. At the bottom, a signature penned in navy. Logan Voss, VP of Distribution. Silas's pulse hammered against his collar. He checked again, then rifled through other approvals. Each of the last 3 supplier contracts bore the same mark, Logan's flourish. No Harlan anywhere. The realization was blunt. Logan hadn't slipped these in without cover. The volume, the terms, the overlapping schedules, they required silence from someone higher. Leaning on the table, Silas exhaled through his nose. His tie bit at his throat. His eyes wandered to a narrow window, high on the wall, half choked with cobwebs. A security lamp outside cut pale gold stripes across the plaster. For a moment it mirrored the night Ellie had handed him that USB wordless, decisive, free of performance. He had chosen this board, trusted it. Harlan had stood with him since the 3rd store opened in St. Louis, back when Silas scrubbed tabletops and drove the delivery van himself. If Harlan knew if he had allowed this to take root, then rot had grown under Silas's skin without his notice. He gathered the papers, clipped them tight with the care of someone who built things not meant to collapse. He slid the file into a plain envelope, tucked it under his arm, and left the fluorescents burning. In the garage, he dropped into his car. The ignition growled alive. From the radio drifted an old Bonnie Raitt tune, one his wife used to hum over laundry baskets before the house fell quiet. His hands tightened on the wheel. The leather felt colder than it should. Beyond the dash, the skyline glittered with detached beauty. Windows blinked at random. Shadows pooled between towers like eavesdroppers. He didn't switch the station, didn't reach for the knob. He stayed still as the chorus rose, the smoky voice spilling regret, reminding him of something he'd worked hard to bury. The dining room sat hushed, the last clink of glass long devoured by refrigeration's drone. Chairs rested upside down on tables, legs jutting skyward like rigid limbs. Ellie moved slowly among them, wiping surfaces more from habit than need. Her wrists ached. The tendon behind her right knee throbbed with sharp warning. Deacon's voice slid in from behind her, smooth as melted wax. "Let's have a word." He didn't wait for agreement, just turned toward the manager's office, certain she'd trail after. Ellie lingered a beat, palm resting on the edge of a table where grape soda had dried hours earlier. A faint purple bloom spread under her rag until it vanished. Only then did she follow. Inside the office stank of cheap cologne laced with Lysol. Deacon leaned against the cabinet arms, crossed mouth, curved in a smile that never reached his eyes. "I saw you," he said casually, "chatting with that man again. Older. Corduroy jacket." "You're not subtle, Ellie." Her pulse stuttered. "He's just a customer." Deacon chuckled, fingers drumming on the desk. "That man hasn't ordered a thing in 3 days. Just sits there. Watches. Tell me who does that." He didn't wait for her reply. "Look, I get it. You think you're some crusader. Brave little thing, standing up for the truth." He pushed off the cabinet, stepping close enough that dried flecks of shaving cream marked the corner of his jaw. "But here's the problem. You're not invisible." From a drawer, he pulled a USB drive, setting it on the desk with a click. "Security footage. Shows you on my laptop. HR won't like it. Neither will the cops." Ellie kept her distance. "What do you want?" "I want you quiet. No more notes. No more prowling offices. And if that man shows up again, you serve him like he's the damn mayor." The silence thickened. Her eyes drifted to a poster on the wall. Teamwork stretched across a photo of 4 people rowing through fog. One paddle missing. She noted the irony. Deacon clamped a hand on her shoulder. "Come on, Ellie, think anyone takes your word over mine? In this city, girl, you're nobody." Her breath caught. Then steady and clear, she answered, "Maybe that's why you're afraid of me." His grin faltered just for a blink before he burst into laughter that filled the room like smoke. "Afraid of you? You're a waitress with a sick brother and no backup." He leaned closer. "Push me and you'll lose everything." She didn't flinch, but the rag twisted tight in her hands, knuckles pale against the terry cloth. "Then you'd better make sure I've got nothing left to lose." His eyes hardened. He pocketed the USB with a flick. "You're not half as clever as you think." "Neither are you," she murmured. The office door creaked as it opened, the sound sharp against the quiet hall. She stepped out, breath hitching once before she forced it steady. Across the corridor, near the coffee station, Silas waited, paper cup in hand, the other tucked in his coat. The light above him flickered once, then steadied. Their gazes met. He said nothing, only moved closer until he rested a cool, steady hand on her shoulder. No tears. No leaning in. But her shaking stopped. Behind them, the office door gaped, light spilling onto the tiles like a question no one wanted to face. Far away, a dish clattered in the kitchen. Upstairs, pipes hissed. The night seemed to hold its breath. The alley behind Gilded Graft reeked of grease and rust. Rain pooled near the drain, catching the sputter of a faulty security lamp above the service entrance. Ellie pulled her hood tight, breath fogging in quick bursts. Silas worked the key Deacon had once carried, then nodded. "Still works," he muttered, easing the door open with a weary creak. It hadn't been locked, either carelessness or intention. The kitchen lay hushed, stainless counters reflecting stray moonlight from the side windows. The drone of freezers thickened the air like static. Ellie led them past the prep station, the same spot where days ago she had slipped a warning under a plate. They reached the office. The air was warmer there, heavy with the residue of secrets. Silas flicked on the desk lamp. Its glow stretched long shadows across the filing cabinets. "Deacon changed his passwords," Ellie whispered. "I know, but he's predictable," Silas replied, cracking his knuckles. "Try his first restaurant. He hasn't updated since 2015. On the 3rd attempt, the desktop opened." Ellie blinked. "Seriously?" A dry smile touched his mouth. "People don't change when they think no one's looking." She navigated the folders, invoices, internal shipping logs. A new one hovered at the top, Q4 adjustments. Buried beneath spreadsheets were emails, redacted memos, scanned receipts, all roads leading back to alt-prime cuts. Silas leaned close, scanning the file names. His voice dropped. "Export everything." As the USB copied the files, Ellie's phone vibrated. She hesitated, then answered. Her face tightened. She put it on speaker. Harlan's voice filled the office, calm but edged. "You need to stop Silas." Silas's expression didn't shift. "That depends what you think I'm doing. You're digging where you shouldn't." Logan stepping down quietly. "Alt-prime cuts will vanish. Don't drag Merrick down with it." Ellie's eyes flicked to him, her hand trembling faintly above the mouse. "You're asking for silence," Silas said. "I'm asking you to leave. Sell your stake. We'll make it look smooth. You'll keep your legacy intact. And the people who got sick, the ones who trusted what we sold, the pause that followed was long enough to sting. Then you always wanted this to be about food and fairness. Don't make it about blood. Click. The line died. The progress bar reached full. Ellie pulled the drive, capped it, slid it into the tiny coin pocket of her jeans. Neither spoke. Rain started again, pattering against the office glass. Silas stepped toward the door, but halfway there, he stopped, glancing back. "We could let it go," he said quietly. Ellie folded a dish towel with deliberate care, slipping it back into her apron. "You could," he studied her. "And you?" No reply. She reached for the switch, snapped the lamp dark, and walked into the hall, her silhouette framed for a moment by the freezer's pale light. He followed, closing the door behind them. The alley looked unchanged, but Ellie paused near the dumpster, eyes tilted upward. The lamp above the door had burned out, leaving only the city's haze bleeding across the sky. "Why now?" she asked without turning. Silas answered without pause. "Because I saw someone write a warning on a napkin instead of walking away." The quiet between them carried weight. They slipped down the alley, the USB warm in Ellie's pocket. Behind them, the gilded graph stood still, unaware. Its polished counters and white aprons had become evidence. The boardroom atop Merrick Holdings was all glass, intention. Sunlight pressed through the windows, yet failed to warm the air. Black leather chairs rimmed the long oak table everyone filled. Not a single glass had been touched, condensation pooling in perfect rings beneath them. Silas stood at the head. No greetings, no quips, no preamble. He laid a folder on the glass surface and pushed it forward. Inside are contract chains, vendor records, shipping invoices, and internal memos. Everyone tied back to a single name, Alt Prime Cuts. No one moved to open the folder. One executive cleared his throat, but the sound vanished into the flat air. "I've had it double verified," Silas went on. "This isn't hearsay. The company's meat passed through a ghost route, relabeled and priced up, while the spoilage data was scrubbed. Someone's been laundering garbage and calling it gourmet." He walked slowly along the side of the table, passing each face like a teacher pacing a room of failing students. Logan Voss signed off the final approval through a third-party shell. Deacon Mallory facilitated the logistics at Gilded Graft. And Harlan, he paused just a second longer, either knew and did nothing, or was asleep at the wheel. From the far end, a board member finally spoke. "Where is Logan now?" "Unreachable. Disconnected all phones. Security footage shows him leaving HQ in the middle of the night with 2 briefcases and a duffel bag. I assume he won't be back." A murmur rose but never broke into full discussion. The air seemed to thicken with every second of silence. Across the table, Harlan Voss sat, stiff fingers interlocked so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. He didn't offer a defense, just stared forward at a legal pad with no words written on it. Silas picked up a remote and tapped a button. The screen behind him flickered to life, revealing an internal chat log. A short exchange between 2 procurement officers, Alt Prime. Again, yeah, Logan's orders. "Deacon knows the drill." "Jesus, this stuff reeks. Just vacuum seal it." Nobody checks. He let the text sit long enough for everyone to read it twice. "I didn't build Merrick Holdings for this," Silas said, voice level but sharpened. "Not to lie to customers. Not to steal from the people working 16-hour shifts to keep kitchens running. Not to profit off rotting meat." He returned to his seat but didn't sit. "I'm signing the order to initiate a full internal audit of all supplier contracts and logistics partners across every unit. Effective immediately." Another board member raised a brow. "What about damage control?" Silas reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've already briefed legal. The moment this becomes public, and it will, we'll lead with accountability, not excuses. Transparency is the only leverage we have left." He unfolded the paper, laid it flat, and slid it across the table. "This is a recommendation to appoint an external ethics and safety consultant to oversee supply chains. Someone who spotted what none of us did." He didn't name her, not yet, but the paper bore Ellie's name typed, clean and centered, with a proposed 6-month contract. "She's not from Harvard, doesn't wear cufflinks, but she caught what you all missed." Chairs shifted. One executive glanced toward Harlan. Another wiped his glasses slowly, buying time to think. No one objected. Silas exhaled, then finally sat, the first time his spine had eased all morning. In the hallway just beyond the heavy wood doors, Ellie stood waiting. She hadn't been invited into the boardroom. She hadn't asked. She was only there to return a folder of scanned documents, told to wait until someone called her in. From where she stood, she couldn't catch the words, only the tone, low, sharp, controlled. Silhouettes shifted behind the frosted glass, a choreography of change without raised voices or pounding fists. Her fingers tightened around the folder. Silas leaned forward once more. This board forgot something fundamental. You don't build trust with marketing. You build it with truth, even when it's ugly. No one replied. For once, every chair stayed filled. The library smelled of dust and floor polish that belonged to another decade. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering faintly across narrow aisles of business texts no one seemed eager to borrow. Ellie traced a faded spine. Sustainable growth for mid-sized enterprises, slid it halfway out, then returned it, finding a strange comfort in the small indecision. She hadn't come for answers. She came for something that didn't feel like obligation. Numbers she chose to face, not numbers waiting to punish her. At the circulation desk, a young woman in a cardigan, one earbud still tucked in, lifted a hand to wave her over. "Excuse me, miss. Someone dropped this off for you earlier." A thin brown envelope rested on the counter. Her name was printed on a sticky note, Ellie R. Thorne, in small all-caps lettering. No return address. No postage. Ellie paused. Did they say who it was from? The woman shook her head, already distracted by whatever was in her left ear. Nope. Just said you'd know. Ellie slid the envelope into her bag and walked toward the reading corner near the far windows. Afternoon light angled through grimy glass, striping the floor in tired gold. She sat in a cracked vinyl chair, exhaled slowly, and opened the flap. A temporary ID card slid out first, Merrick Holdings temporary consultant, E. Thorne. Below it, clipped neatly to the plastic sleeve, was a letter on heavy paper. No letterhead, just text. Enclosed is a 6-month consulting agreement, renewable upon review. Your responsibilities will center on supply chain ethics, food safety protocol, and internal reporting procedures. Full discretion is expected. Full transparency is required. This isn't charity. You've earned this. SM at the bottom, separate from the formal paragraph structure, was a single line in blue ink. The handwriting slanted left slightly, like it didn't care for attention. We'll rebuild it, but this time with real bricks. Ellie didn't smile, but her shoulders eased. Hands that had spent years folding napkins, wiping counters, and tugging at frayed soles now held a future written in ink. She read the note once more, then folded it carefully. The badge slipped into her jacket pocket, kept close, not out of fear it might vanish, but because it still felt too fragile to leave exposed. Turning toward the window, she watched brittle leaves chase each other across the sidewalk, lifted by a restless wind. Across the street, a boy wobbled on his bike, trying to balance a pizza box against the handlebars. Ellie pulled out her phone. She hadn't texted Miles all day, not from neglect, but because she hadn't known what to say until this moment. Her thumb hovered, then pressed. The call rang twice. "Hey," came his raspy voice, worn with fatigue. "Hey," she answered softly. "You up for pizza tonight?" A pause. "You okay?" "Yeah," she whispered. "I've got a story for you." Miles didn't press. He never needed to. Ellie ended the call, slipped the book from earlier under her arm. Sustainable growth. She didn't check it out, just carried it past the desk, past the rusted bike rack, and into the wind that smelled of exhaust and brittle leaves. Behind her, the library door closed slow. No latch, no echo. Only the hush of a place that had given her silence long enough. That night there would be pizza on their couch. Stories traded between bites, between laughter. At some point, Miles would ask what had changed. She would hesitate, then admit, "Someone gave me a key to a door I didn't know existed." And he would nod as if he understood. Maybe he truly did. Across town, in an office no longer empty, Silas would draw a red line through the final draft of a report, lean back, and think of scaffolding, of how some structures hold stronger when built the second time. The kitchen clock hadn't ticked in months, yet morning spilled in regardless. Pale sunlight threaded through a cracked window pane, laying soft stripes across the tiled floor like a quiet promise. The air carried a faint mix of dust and yesterday's toast. Ellie knelt on the faded linoleum, ringed by a small fortress of pill bottles, blister packs, and prescription slips. The medicine box, warped cardboard with frayed corners, sat open at her side, its contents disordered and weary like soldiers stumbling home from too many campaigns. She twisted the cap from an empty inhaler, shook it once, then set it down. Piece by piece, she inspected the remnants, expired antibiotics, a child-proof bottle of acetaminophen that never locked properly, a half-used jar of vapor rub sealed tight with crust. A paper slid loose from the stack. Sona, it was one of the oldest prescriptions, Miles' name scribbled in dull blue ink, the corners curled from being folded too many times. She stared at it until the words blurred. Her hand trembled. She wasn't cold. She was just letting go. She sat back against the cabinet, bare feet flat against the cool floor, and cried. No one was watching. No one needed her to be useful right now. No one was waiting for a plate, a signature, a shift to be filled. The tears didn't come fast or dramatic. They came like steam from a kettle, soft, inevitable, and long overdue. The floor creaked. Miles drifted from the hallway, hoodie slipping off, one shoulder hair still tangled from sleep. He rubbed at his eye with the back of his wrist. You okay? Ellie swiped her sleeve across her face. Yeah, I am. In her grip rested a new prescription slip, crisp, uncreased. At the top, covered under Merrick Health Fund, lifetime allocation. At the bottom, her own signature. Miles's gaze dropped to the paper, then rose again. He didn't smile, not yet, just gave a quiet nod before moving to set the kettle on. Later on the narrow balcony, Ellie knelt again, this time over a metal mixing bowl. Within it lay what no longer owned them: collection notices, overdue hospital bills, a spreadsheet once color-coded with debt payments. She touched a match to the corner of the oldest sheet. The flame crept slowly, a faint hiss before the paper curled to black. No sudden blaze, only a steady burn that matched her breath. Page by page, she fed the fire. A grocery slip showing nothing but ramen and apples. A warning letter stamped final notice in red. An envelope from the hospital, her name spelled wrong. Smoke spiraled upward into the open air, gray ribbons unraveling against the blue sky. A breeze tugged the ash away, scattering it like crumbs from a path that no longer led backward. Her lips parted, not to proclaim, but to let go. They don't have a hold on me anymore. She rose, brushing her palms against her jeans. Behind her, the door eased open, and Miles stepped out carrying 2 mugs. He offered one. The coffee was thin, cheap, but hot. He didn't speak, only stood beside her, drinking in silence. Below, a delivery truck grumbled past. A dog barked from a window across the street. Ordinary noises, yet each carried a new resonance, like the city itself had shifted a note higher. Ash drifted beyond the railing, spinning in the sunlight before snagging briefly on a spiderweb strung between 2 bars. Ellie watched it balance, trembling, then slip free to the wind. The final envelope smoldered slower than the rest. Addressed to Ms. E. Thorne, App 2C. The glue sizzled before collapsing into ash. A gust lifted it into the air, scattering in a faint line that stretched forward like a map drawn on nothing. Ellie didn't follow, not yet, but this time she smiled. For once there was room to wait. The conference room wasn't much, just pale wood stretched into a table, a dented cabinet in the corner chairs that creaked if anyone shifted too quickly. No skyline windows, no glass polish. Only printouts, notebooks, and the low drone of fluorescent light. Ellie sat at the far end with a red pen resting in her right hand, the same kind she'd once used to tally tips on napkins in the service station. No nameplate needed. Everyone here knew who she was. They'd read the memos she would be traveling with the internal audit teams as an independent advisor on supply chain ethics. Ellie wasn't there to play watchdog. She was there to listen, but if listening uncovered rot action was allowed. The man to her left, a logistics coordinator from Grand Rapids, pointed to a line on the shipment report. This supplier came back online last quarter. We flagged them before, but... Ellie read the column twice, then tapped the red pen against the margin. Let's check the warehouse records. In person. Not just the files. No one objected. She had grown used to being talked over. That didn't happen anymore. 2 days later, in a kitchen far north of Detroit, a teenage sous chef with a nervous look kept glancing at his clipboard. When he brought out a tray of prep cuts for inspection, he cleared his throat and whispered, "You're her right." Ellie looked up. He bit his lip. The waitress from Gilded, the one with the note. No reply, just a small smile. That was enough. At the back of the storage freezer, the labels didn't match the logs. One box had a torn corner resealed with tape that wasn't standard issue. Kneeling pen light steady between her fingers, Ellie checked closer. The meat looked fine. Too fine. Later in the storage office, records told a different story. 3 recent deliveries bore a vendor name not in the approved registry. Cross-checking purchase orders revealed 2 with identical digital signatures. Not Deacon this time. Someone new. Someone familiar. She circled the records in red, drew a line beneath them, and wrote, "Secondary investigation required. Pause all incoming shipments." When the file was handed back to the site manager, her expression stayed even. "You'll get an audit visit within 48 hours. Keep everything where it is." The man nodded stiffly. No one argued, not anymore. That night in her hotel room above a strip mall in Ann Arbor, Ellie logged into the secure portal and filed her recommendation, temporary supplier, freeze background check on procurement staff, and an immediate amendment to the regional hiring contracts. Under optional notes, she typed one sentence: request addition of ethics clause requiring training at onboarding for all staff handling inventory. She hesitated, then added, including managers. The red pen lay beside the laptop cap off ink, drying slow on its tip. At the next review session, Ellie placed her report on the table and slid it forward. One of the senior audit leads raised an eyebrow. "You sure about the full stop order?" "Yes." He skimmed the last page, then nodded and passed it along. The room stayed hushed. Everyone read. No one questioned. Fingers curled around the edge of her notepad, still calloused from trays and scalding plates from slipping notes beneath steak knives. Now they carried a different kind of authority. One report, one pen. That was all she'd asked for. Across the table, someone handed her a new badge. Temporary laminated edges, still sharp. On it, her name. Not Ellie Thorne. Ellie Grafton. Correction never crossed her lips. The meeting ended without applause. No pats on the back, no handshakes stretched too long. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped. She remained seated, collecting her notes at a slow pace. When the room cleared, she lingered. Her gaze wandered to the sweating glass of water on the table, then to the blank wall where a framed photo of the founding board had once hung. It had been removed for renovation. No one mentioned putting it back. The red pen clicked softly as she scribbled a reminder in her notebook, then rested beside the latest audit file. Not once did she glance behind her. The new sign above the door read, "Second Cup," its letters painted in quiet blue edges, chipped just enough to look permanent. Ellie nudged the door open with her shoulder, a bell announcing her entrance, though no one looked up. Silas was already seated at the table by the glass wall, nursing a cup that steamed faintly in the morning light. He wasn't reading a report or tapping on his phone, just watching the lake where the water slapped gently against the stone edges, and the sky hadn't quite decided whether to stay gray or go blue. Ellie slipped into the chair across from him, her coat still holding the chill of the lake wind. "You're early," she said. "I've been waiting 17 years to finish something," he replied. "I thought I'd try being on time." She smiled, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. Miles's laptop sat between them, propped open. His face filled the screen lips, moving with some excited retelling of a class project. His voice was muted, but his eyes sparkled in that wide, freshly woken way. "He's getting good at public speaking," Silas observed. "He's also become weirdly obsessed with Excel formatting." Ellie said, her voice soft with something between amusement and awe. "He fixed the neighbor's taxes last week." Unprompted. Silas chuckled. "Must run in the family." She leaned back. "I've been taking night classes. Accounting. I want to understand more than just what's broken. I want to know how to build something that holds." He looked impressed but didn't say so out loud. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a worn piece of tracing paper. The lines sketched across it were sharp and elegant, half structure, half intention. "It's the bridge," he said, laying it between their coffee mugs. "The one I left behind. Finished it last month." Ellie traced a line with her eyes, not her fingers. "Where does it go between 2 parks in Indiana? Somewhere nobody important lives. That's the point." They sat like that for a while, no rush pressing at their backs. The waitress, a young girl with dark lipstick and a smile that didn't push too hard, brought them a slice of warm apple pie split in half. "You ordered this?" Ellie asked. "I owed you dessert," Silas replied, handing her a fork. She hesitated. Years ago, she would have looked at the price tag in her head before touching it. Now she took a bite without apology. It tasted like cinnamon and trust. Silas set his fork down. "You didn't just save the company," he said quietly. "You saved the part of me that thought it couldn't be saved." Ellie blinked. "I didn't do it for that. I know. That's why it worked." She stood stretching slightly, then wandered toward the sliding glass doors that lined the cafe wall. One by one, she unlatched the windows, pushing them open until the full lake breeze filled the room. The cold air swept in, lifting napkins, rustling menus, turning a few heads but earning no complaints. When she turned back, Silas had leaned into the light, the corner of his mouth lifted. "Little dramatic. Don't you think I figured if we're going to start over," she said, "we might as well let the real air in." The breeze carried the smell of distant firewood and lake salt. Somewhere out on the water, a boat's horn sounded faint but distinct. She returned to her seat. The pie was nearly gone. The laptop screen had gone black miles, having wandered off between Zoom tabs. Next to the salt and pepper shakers, a folded white napkin sat neatly in a triangle. Ellie hadn't seen it placed there. She reached for it, unfolding the linen like she'd done 100 times in her old shifts. One sentence written in steady blue ink. "If it smells wrong, trust your nose." No signature. Just enough space for her to know it wasn't just advice, it was an invitation. She looked out the open window again. The lake glinted in patches. Somewhere behind them, the coffee machine hissed like a memory exhaling. And the napkin stayed exactly where it was, fluttering just a little at the edges, never quite still, never quite needing to be. Some battles aren't won in boardrooms or headlines. They're won in quiet rooms with trembling hands and choices no one will ever see. Ellie didn't fight to become a hero. She fought because something smelled wrong, and she trusted her gut when no one else would. The truth is, integrity doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers on a napkin and changes everything. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's coming next. Real stories, real people, one choice at a time.